Hello, and welcome to the Little Things in Yarhnam. I'm your host, Redgrave, and today we're going to be talking about quite a few things. Before I get started on this particular episode, we just have a few production-y things just to get out of the way. First of all, in my last video, I specifically mentioned at the end of the video, I said that I had no plans to make a Patreon, and I had no plans for any kind of that because of a lot of different reasons that I went over in that video. And then after I published that video, I immediately got a bunch of comments and a bunch of messages by people saying I should do it and asking me to open a Patreon anyway and that sort of thing. So fine, I made a Patreon, whatever, and I'm going to talk about it once in this video, and I'm never going to mention it again, probably. You'll be able to find a link in my channel video, or my channel, but that's it. And I'm probably never going to mention it again, because I'm not really comfortable talking about that kind of thing. And I really need to make this clear. Supporting me with money or anything like that is not... Money is not what's limiting my content. I mean, obviously, I personally work 2 jobs, and I just to support myself, and so I don't have a lot of time to make videos. But it's not like I need this money for a project so that I can buy the equipment I need to make it better. So if you're gonna give me content, I need to make this clear that it's not like you're giving me money. I don't want people to feel obligated to pay, because it's like if they don't pay, my content won't be as good, and they're not getting the best content unless they pay money for it. That's not what I want. And you'll notice that none of my videos are monetized because I don't make a penny off of them. This is a hobby for me. But because people feel like they want to support me through monetary values, fine. I made a Patreon. There's going to be there's a link to it in my channel. If it's not up immediately, it will be up eventually after I upload this video. So it'll be there. And I don't like talking about that because it's uncomfortable to me, the idea that people should be obligated to pay money for what I feel should be free content. And I mean, you'll notice that the Pale Blood Hunt is free, and I very much specified that, and that was very important to me, was that it was accessible to anyone, no matter what. Okay, getting that out of the way, because who cares about that shit. I also want to make an addendum to my last video on bells. This is actually my fault. I really should have clarified specifically in my last video that I really just wanted to talk about the bell ringing women and their ability to summon and that sort of thing. And a lot of people, rightfully so, said, what about all the bells that the Healing Church uses? Because I didn't mention them at all. And that's my fault, in that I didn't clarify that I specifically wanted to talk about the bell ringers, and I pretty much skipped right past a pretty important amount of bells. So people asked me about that. I haven't put much thought into it, but given that we know that the Thumerians used bells to summon the spirits of the dead, and given the fact that the church servants are specifically called church servants, and that the black church garb and the white church garb don't have bells. It's just the church servants and the church giants that have these bells around their neck. So it's not like the bell is a specific part of the church uniform. It's something that's only worn by the servants and by the giants, and they appear to be undead Thumerians. It's possible that what the Healing Church is doing is going into the Chalice dungeons and using bells to basically build a cheap renewable army, sort of binding spirits to these corpses and animating them. I mean, we find a few giants wandering around in the poison swamp, and they don't even have the church garb on. They just have the bells on, and it looks like they were just tossed there as guards to prevent people from snooping around. So that's possible. Also, people noted that, yeah, Eileen also has a, or not specifically the Crow Feather garb, so not necessarily Eileen. The Crow Feather garb also has a bell as part of its uniform. We know that the Hunters of Hunters considered Yarhnam burial services blasphemous, and I went into that quite a bit in my first episode of Little Things in Yarhnam. And as we know from the previous episode, there are two types of bells in the Japanese Bone Festival. One that summons the spirits of the dead, and one that sends them back. So maybe it's the case that it's just this. It's a symbolic sort of talisman that the Hunters of Hunters carry. You know, because when they perform sky burial and that sort of, it's their way of sort of putting the dead to rest. Maybe I haven't really put much thought into it, but. For those of you who asked me, there you go. I hope that helps get over just the fact that I totally dropped the ball there, and I didn't make it clear exactly what I was talking about in the previous video, and so a lot of people were naturally confused, and rightfully so. Okay. Now, let's get on to the little things in Yarhnam, and I have to use air quotes around little, because this episode, and probably the next episode, which will probably be about Uden, are not about the little things in Yarhnam at all. They're about very big things. It's funny, when I started this series, because I felt like I had pretty much covered all of the big things in Bloodborne that I wanted to talk about, and so I moved on from that. I was like, you know what, I'll let the next generation discuss their theories about the doll and the moon presence, and I'm just going to go off and look at tiny things like caskets and the Hunter's Mark, and then the DLC happened, and now we have to go back and revise the way we view a lot of things, and so now there's a lot of new big topics to talk about. So this episode and the next episode are going to be the little things in Yarhnam in big, bold air quotes, and then after that it'll probably be business as usual. Today, this episode was going to be about Brador, and it still will be about Brador, but as I was really doing a look into who Brador is and what this character is, it kind of opened a bit of a rabbit hole for me. And I just gotta say, strap yourselves in, because we're going on a bit of a bumpy ride. And a lot of what I'm gonna say... Look, excuse me while I wipe my nose. It's disgusting. You shouldn't have to see that. This is why people who are popular and get paid to do this edit their videos. But I am really lazy. Yeah, so this is gonna be a bumpy ride, this video. The subject of this video was originally Brador Church Assassin, but I feel like what I'm gonna call it is the Hunter's Origins. And that doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but I think I've sort of pulled the threads together, and I've come across something that's kind of significant. But for starters, we're going to talk about Brador and who this guy is, because this was really what sort of jump-started everything for me. For starters, Brador, Church Assassin, new character in the DLC. In terms of gameplay, he is the only... Hi, Calvin. Where'd he go? What the hell? Is that a disembodied meow? Is that Uden meowing? Hang on, guys. He wants water, I think. Yeah, he wants water. No, he just wants attention. Whatever. Who cares? Brador, Church Assassin. So this is, first of all, this is the only guy who invades you in the entire game. You know, like in Demon Souls and in Dark Souls 1 and 2, you know, it was very common to get invaded not just by other players, but also by NPC. In Demon Souls, it was the Black Phantoms, and then in Dark Souls, the Dark Wraiths. Not necessarily Dark Souls had a lot of different terms for it. You know, you had like Law Trick doing one thing, and whatever. Brador is the only one who does that in Bloodborne, and so let's take a look at who this guy is and what he's doing. So, for starters, we know that he was a early church hunter. And we know that he killed a cleric beast. And he skinned it alive and scalped it. Or not skinned it alive. He skinned it and scalped it. He wore it as like a Silence of the Lamb's cloak. And in order to, and sort of went into a self-imposed imprisonment. He allowed the Healing Church to lock him away to protect their secrets. A few people have, or not a few people, but a lot of people believe that the secret that Brador is protecting is Kos and the fishing hamlet, because he seems to invade you as you go towards Kos. But that's not true. Brador actually doesn't give a fuck about Kos. He doesn't care whether you go to Kos or not. And I can pretty confidently state that as fact. Because if you never pick up his key, you can go to Kos and he will just let you blast, and he won't give a fuck. And then the counter to that is people are like, well, then why didn't he kill Simon until Simon went to the fishing hamlet? And that's because Simon didn't have the key to Brador's cell until Simon went to the fishing hamlet and found it. If you either kill Simon in the Hunter's Nightmare, or you just don't ever talk to him and you don't do his dialogue, you won't find Simon in the fishing village hut. I forget what the specific lamp is called, but you won't find him in that hut. You'll find the key on the ground. So it looks like what happened is Simon found the key, picked it up, and then Brador killed him. So it looks like what Brador is doing is he's invading people who have the key to his cell, because, and so what it looks like the secret he's protecting is himself. Is that, and specifically, given that his helmet, quote unquote, which is the scalp of a cleric beast, is called Brador's testimony, it seems to imply that the specific secret he's protecting has to do with what he did, and what the events surrounding his murder of a compatriot were. Brador's weapon is called the Bloodletter, and I have the description of it right here. Let me just, in my notes, let me just read it out loud. The demented hunter weapon brandished by Brador, the Healing Church assassin. The Bloodletter assumes its true and terrifying form after it draws upon blood from the inner reaches of one's body and soul. This is the only effective means of expelling tainted blood, or so Brador, isolated in his cell, continued to believe. So, bloodletting. Now, obviously, this is not the first time we've heard of bloodletting. We obviously have the bloodletting beast, but we're gonna go into that later. Hi, Calvin. You want to talk about bloodletting? You don't want to talk about bloodletting. And this brings me to Brador. At least it depicts that in the formative era of the Healing Church, it seems as if bloodletting was viewed as a method to get rid of the scourge, to sort of purify a body almost of the tainted blood. And this leads me to the impurity rune. There was a Reddit thread, I can't remember the guy's name, but I will find it before I upload this video, and I will provide a link somewhere in the description so you can see where I got this from. But there was a guy on Reddit who suggested that because the Hunter's Mark might be a man dangling upside down, the impurity rune might be a guy right side up, and it kind of looked like a crucifixion. And I think, and that was very interesting to me, but I think he's only half right. And that, yes, it does depict a crucifixion, but specifically looking at the circles falling down, like the drops falling down, it specifically depicts a bloodletting. It's a figure crucified, bleeding looks like from the wrists, which, if you know anything about Christian Calvin, what are you doing down there? So, if you know about the crucifixion of Christ, nailed through the wrist and, bled out through the wrist. which was very fascinating to me when I went to Old Yarhnam and took a look back, because, you know, this got me thinking. So I went back to Old Yarhnam and I looked at I went to the Church of the Good Chalice, and yeah, you remember that bloodletting beast that's crucified? Or that, not the bloodletting, the blood-starved beast that's crucified? It's been bloodlet. It was crucified, and there's a pool of blood underneath it. And when you fight the blood-starved beast, you know, why is it blood-starved? Because there's no blood in it. When you attack it, it doesn't bleed. It just oozes like pus. You know, it's just muscle that you're cutting into. There's no blood in there. It's been flayed, and all the blood has been drained from it, which is why it's blood-starved. So it looks like in the old days of the Healing Church, bloodletting was seen as a very important practice to sort of cleanse people, which could very much explain why the English version of the bloodletting beast is called the bloodletting beast. A lot of people for months now have been noting that in the Japanese version of the game, the bloodletting beast is basically called like host of the beast blood or lord of the beast blood, and one of the possible translations is even like origins of the beast blood. So basically it's like patient zero, which people are like, why would they ever call it the bloodletting beast when that doesn't make any sense? And this obviously brings us to the discussion of whether or not the bloodletting beast is the corpse of Lawrence. This is something that you can go back and forth with forever. I think it is. I thought it was, then I thought it wasn't. Now I think it is again. I think it is. But basically I came to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter if the bloodletting beast is Lawrence's corpse. The only thing that really matters about it is that it gives concrete confirmation that the Healing Church in its formative era had contact with Queen Yarhnam. That's the only thing that really matters when it comes to whether or not Lawrence is the bloodletting beast. Because the bloodletting beast is very heavily implied to be Lawrence. The gash lines up perfectly. And, you know, when you fight Lawrence the First Vicar in the Hunter's Nightmare, he bleeds lava out of the entire left side of his face and back, exactly where the bloodletting beast's wounds are. How you can explain the change in how he looks, there's 1,000 different ways you can do that. I'm not gonna get into that. And while we're on that subject, I think we should probably clarify what a cleric beast is, because people are saying that Lawrence couldn't be the bloodletting beast because the bloodletting beast isn't a cleric beast, which is just wrong. When you think of a cleric beast, it's literally just a beast that is a cleric. Like Vicar Amelia is a cleric beast. Ludwig is a cleric beast. Just because they don't look like the cleric beast from the beginning of the game doesn't make them not cleric beasts. It's not like there's a specific species of Scourge of the Beast. No, it's just it manifests itself in different ways. And we call these giant monsters cleric beasts in order to distinguish them from the beasts that are walking around Yarhnam. You know, we have plenty of sort of human-sized beasts and human-sized Scourge beasts, and then you have cleric beasts, which are way fucking scarier. You know, boss fights, basically. And so the use of the terminology cleric beast doesn't confirm or deny anything there. But if we look at the early formative era of the Healing Church as practicing bloodletting, oh, and by the way, there are crucified beasts everywhere in Yarhnam, and yeah, they're nailed at the wrist. Crucifixion is something that is very important in Bloodborne. Historically speaking, in terms of just historical accuracy, that type of crucifixion, there's no real evidence for it, of people being nailed at the wrist like Christ was, and even being suspended like this is not as likely. The evidence points towards actual crucifixions as having been with a single post, and people would be tied to it, and it was just a form of slow death. And there are a lot of depictions of that in Bloodborne, of more historically accurate crucifixions. And, you know, the hanged man is a crucifixion, because, you know, in some cases of crucifixion, you would be suspended upside down by the feet, so the blood would pool to your head, and it would be a slow, agonizing death. And you know, like, that's what the hanged man card depicts, is a crucifixion. The card obviously implies and is interpreted through being a self-imposed crucifixion, which adds a whole other layer to that. But that's not as important for the purpose of what we're talking about right now. So crucifixion is very important in Bloodborne. And if we think of it, assuming that the bloodletting beast is Lawrence, that would explain why it's called the bloodletting beast, because it was the bloodletter. It was that which treated the sick. Which means it's possible that the bloodletter was originally Lawrence's weapon. Assuming that Lawrence is the bloodletting beast, then it would make sense as to why his weapon would be called the bloodletter. You know what I mean? But Brador has the bloodletter, and Brador killed a cleric beast. He scalped it and skinned it and wore its hide, and it drove him insane. If you've read my work, you'll know that I posited pretty much the day after the DLC came out, and as soon as I bumped into Brador, and as soon as I read the description of it on his gear, I was like, I have to talk about this with someone, because you know that like immediately I fled to the internet to talk to anyone who would be willing to talk to me about it, because this was like before spoilers were like acceptable. And so I went to anyone I could find, and to talk about the idea that perhaps the cleric beast that Brador had killed was Lawrence, and that was why he was imprisoned. And if the bloodletter was Lawrence's weapon, that would explain it. Lawrence transforms into the first cleric beast. Brador puts him down and then skins him, because the act of watching the first vicar turn into a beast drives him crazy. He skins him alive. And then the healing church, and then he willingly locks himself away so that the healing church, so that nobody knows the truth of what happened to Lawrence, because he has a testimony to the truth of the healing church, which is that the blood they're administering is turning everyone into monsters. He is the witness to what happened. And so they locked himself away. And he doesn't give a fuck about Kos. He just cares about people learning the truth about that. And that's what he's protecting. Ooh, that was a bit of a mouthful. Hey, buddy, what's up? What's up, buddy? Go play. Okay. That's Brador. But that is where I would have originally planned to end this video. But there's something very, very important about Brador. Come here, man. Come here. Brador is wearing the foreign garb. Brador's clothes are the same as the clothes that we are wearing when we wake up in Yarhnam. Not the same. It's not like he's wearing the identical clothes. They're of a different color. But they're the same style. They're the same foreign patterns and style of clothing. In fact, the beast garb even notes that without the beast hide around it, nobody would raise an eyebrow at this foreign garb. Whoever Brador is, and wherever he's from the same place we are. Us as characters, as the Pale Blood Hunter, the player. Brador is from the same place. Now, a lot of people have made theories about why our player came to Yarhnam, who our player was before coming to Yarhnam. And I had always been one of those people who was just like, yeah, whatever, have whatever fun theories you want. It doesn't matter who we were, because we're just a blank slate. And that was just how I viewed it, and I was like, there's no real point to looking at who we might have been before we came here. But we can't adopt that position anymore, that it doesn't matter who we are. Because we have right here a definitive link to ourselves. We have here someone who's from the same place we are. And when we look at his dialogue, it gets a little weirder. So we're going to go by it piece by piece. I have his dialogue right here in my notes, and we're going to go through every single line. All right, when you first meet him, are you a hunter? Well, that's very odd. Okay, so first of all, why is it odd that we're a hunter? We're in the hunter's nightmare. Everyone here is a hunter. Everyone here is either a hunter or a remnant of a memory, like some manifestation of the nightmare. So why is it odd that we're a hunter? Okay, we're going to continue. The beasts you seek will not be here. This is what he says. If you say, I hear the bell, or you say, I hear nothing, he'll say this no matter what. The beasts you seek will not be found here. Go back to your hunt, and if you have the chance, put this night behind you. What he's specifically saying right there is, you don't belong here in this DLC. Go back to the main game, do your hunt, and he's even suggesting that we submit to Gehrman. He's not saying it word for word, but he's saying go back to your hunt, and if you win, have Gehrman put this night behind you. Have Gehrman sever the dream. Okay. Hopefully he'll calm down eventually. All right. When you enter his cell, well, look who's here. Calvin, you really gotta knock it off, dude. This is some serious shit. This is serious Bloodborne shit. And I can't have you making your cute little kitty noises during this serious Bloodborne shit. Do you understand me? Come on, I love you. Go play. Alright? He knows. He's agitated. He's agitated by how serious this is. When you enter his cell, well, look who's here. Welcome to my quarters. I've never entertained a guest before. Are you going to kill me? After all you've done, kill me as if to right your wrongs. And he says that even if you didn't talk to him when you first met him. He says, well, look who's here. Are you a hunter? That's odd. Go back to your hunt. After all you've done. Brador knows who we are. Brador knows us. Like, that's the only way I can interpret these messages, is that he recognizes us. That's why he's confused if we're a hunter. He's like, oh, is that just some remnant of the nightmare that's brought this person from my memory up? Oh no, it's actually you. You're actually here as a hunter. That's odd. How did you get here? Brador knows who we are. And instantly, when I thought of this, I thought, but how could that possibly be? Because he's clearly been locked away for so long. He's been locked away for, I'd say, a minimum of, 50 years. When you look at him in the cell, he's very old and withered, and he has a full beard. Although, interestingly, his phantoms that attack you are very young. They're very youthful. The beard is trimmed and that sort of thing. So it seems like it's like a younger version of himself that's chasing after you. Brador knows who we are. How is that possible? How is that possible? And this brings me to the timeline of Bloodborne. And I get asked questions all the time about the timeline of Bloodborne. Because it's so weird. Because Bloodborne's timeline is so weird. And so what I'm going to be suggesting is going to sound kind of silly or kind of weird or kind of crazy. But bear with me, because just bear with me on this. Which is that it's almost as if Yarhnam is a city of the damned. And I don't mean that as if it's like some kind of purgatory or limbo, and that like it's where bad people go when they die. No, it's a real place. It's a real place on the planet. But it's almost like Yharnam is some kind of city of the damned. What do I mean by that? Well, for starters, when we wake up in Bloodborne, we have like a hood pulled over us, and the hood implies that we came here under cover of darkness to avoid prying eyes. And if we look at our possible origins, all of them imply a great deal of trauma. You know, cruel fate, a violent past, military veteran, waste of skin. The only one that doesn't imply some kind of significant trauma is Milquetoast, which is just like, here, you want your average archetype? There you go, have fun. You know, but all the other ones seem to imply some kind of very significant traumatic experience. And if we look at Yarhnamites, they all violently hate outsiders, but it's a city made up of outsiders. You know, everyone in Yarhnam came to Yarhnam from outside. You know, you have Gilbert, Eileen, Gascoigne, you know, the list goes on of people who appear to have come to Yarhnam from somewhere else, for whatever mean. It's almost as if people who are sick or dying or insane or violent are somehow drawn to Yarhnam. It sort of calls to them. And you know, Yarhnam is this place that exists sort of halfway in the Dreamlands almost. You know, the veil, if you want to think of the barrier between the waking world and the Dreamlands as being a veil, the veil in Yarhnam is very thin. Very, very thin. You know, people constantly talk about how the city is cursed. You know, and they talk about it quite literally, like as if just this place is wrong. And, you know, Yarhnam, when we talk about Yarhnam, we think of it as a city, but Yarhnam can kind of be thought of kind of like New York, whereas Yarhnam is not just the city, it's also the whole region that we're on. So, like, places like Hemwick and presumably a couple of other villages around it are also part of Yarhnam, the region, while they're not part of the city. In fact, I think there's a few places where it distinctly separates Cathedral Ward from being Yarhnam, saying it's like two different cities that are both in Yarhnam, although the Cathedral Ward isn't Yarhnam City, if that sort of makes sense. And, you know, we can also kind of think of Canehurst as being a part of Yarhnam in a sense that Canehurst is on this same region, this area. And where is this place? You know, these people are drawn to it, but there's no city gates. Like, how did we get here? It's almost like Yarhnam is some kind of city of the damned where people sort of wander. You know, who are the native Yarhnamites? Who are the people who are originally from Yarhnam? The Thumerians. You know, their last queen before the Thumerian civilization collapsed was called Queen Yarhnam. And we learned from the Ehil Chalice that queens would adapt classical names when they took the throne. And so presumably, you know, the land of Yarhnam, which was ruled by the Thumerian people, it was their native land, and then the queen named herself Yarhnam after the land. And then it's sort of like slowly over time, after the civilization collapsed, you know, people kind of came to Yarhnam over time, sort of maybe even drawn to it. And this sort of explains Canehurst. You know, in Canehurst, we have an example of sort of like the remnants of Thumerian civilization. In just the, you know, not the remnants of Thumerian civilization, but certainly the remnants of Thumerian culture we have in Yarhnam. Or not in Canehurst, although Canehurst is on Yarhnam. Bear with me on this, because, where was I? And, you know, this would really explain why there are a couple of Thumerians walking around. You know, there are descendants of Thumerian. You know, if you look at Logarius, for example, Logarius is a Thumerian. Not only is he the same shape as size as the Thumerian descendants and the Thumerian elders, but his style of fighting is virtually identical to the Thumerian elder boss fight in the Chalice dungeons. The only real difference is that Logarius uses arcane blood, whereas the elder uses arcane fire. But even the sounds they make are virtually identical when they're fighting. And the dive that Logarius does, the Thumerian elder does the exact same dive. Logarius is a Thumerian, so you can sort of think of Logarius as being descendant from native Yarhnamites, whereas everyone else in Yarhnam is sort of an outsider, or is the product of interbreeding between Thumerians and Yarhnamites, because remember, Thumerians are human beings. They're not like an alien species. They're just human beings that look very different because of how twisted, you know, the Eldritch Truth was. So it's not like they're a different species. And so we have the descendants of, you know, Thumerians, and we also have, you know, just people who came here and then settled. And everyone in Yarhnam is just vicious and mean and cruel, except for the chapel dweller. He's the only nice guy around. Everyone else has an ulterior motive or is a little bit off on edge. you know, everyone in Yarhnam is violent or sick or insane, and this town is cursed. Okay, so bringing all that back, Yarhnam is very close to the Dreamlands. Very close to the Dreamlands. If you look at certain stories in folklore, there's a lot of stuff to do with things like time dilation, which I'm going to explain in a moment. Lord Dunsany, or I'll explain Lord Dunsany in a moment. Time dilation is sort of implying, like, in Irish mythology, for example, you get this a lot. The idea that someone is whisked away to another realm, another world, and they spend, 50 or 60 or 70 years in this other world, and then they come back to their homeworld, and it's only been like 3 minutes. And you get the reverse too. I think JSF mentions this in his video on Caners. It doesn't matter. You also get similar stories in Eastern mythology as well, of people who go to other realms and spend 2 minutes and then come back and it's been like 40 years. So you get both. And time dilation, that theme is very prevalent in the works of Lord Dunsany, who, if you're not familiar with, Lord Dunsany was a writer who was pretty much the prime inspiration for Lovecraft. Lovecraft, is very heavily influenced and inspired by the works of Lord Dunsany. So, if we think of Yarhnam as this sort of cursed city of the damned that exists halfway in the Dreamlands, what if it's the case that it sort of exists outside of the rest of the world's timeline? Which would kind of explain why the timeline is so fucked up. Because time is sort of irrelevant. What if it's the case that when Brador was a young man 60 years ago, we knew him and we talked to him, and then he went to Yarhnam and we stayed wherever we were, and he aged 50 years, but we only aged about 3 minutes. I know it sounds crazy, but it's a definite possibility. Which brings us to the question of where did we come from? And why did we come to Yarhnam? The hunter's origins. So, when I was looking at the origins of the hunter, the pale blood hunter, specifically. When I say the pale blood hunter, I refer to the character that the player creates. When we look at the pale blood hunter's possible origins, the first thing I noticed was that none of them contradict each other themselves, anything else, other than obviously milquetoast and the waste of skin, which are the average and the extreme, respectively. But other than that, all of the more flavored text origins, none of them contradict each other. Noble scion, cruel fate, violent past, military veteran, lone survivor. Now, I'm not the first person to mention this in regards to the DLC. A couple different people have mentioned the fact that the lone survivor origin specifically states that the pale blood hunter is the lone survivor of a forgotten hamlet. And a lot of people have made that comparison to the fishing hamlet. And at first I kind of brushed this aside because at this point I wasn't considering the player's origins as being something to explore. But given the evidence that Brador might have known the pale blood hunter, and given the fact that the lone survivor origin doesn't contradict any of the other origin possibilities, I think we have to consider that as a valid possibility. So, what connections can we find? If we confirm the idea, because that Brador and the pale blood hunter knew each other at one point, which it definitely seems is the case, What we have to do then... Oh my god, shut the fuck up. This is super serious. Do you not hear my serious tone? Serious. Come here, buddy. Come here, buddy. Don't you run away from me. You know I'm going to snuggle you whether you want it or not. Okay. Okay. Shh. Shh. Okay. So if we consider the fact that the Brador and the Pale Blood Hunter knew each other, and we consider that as fact, we have to look at where did Brador come from? Where is Brador from? And there are quite a number of links between Brador and the fishing hamlet. The fishing hamlet, just to give a very brief look at it. So, long time ago, back in the time of Byrgenwerth, and the fishing hamlet is quite clearly not in Yarhnam. It's not clear whether the area we go to in the Nightmare is the physical fishing hamlet dragged into the Nightmare, or if it's just a representation of the fishing hamlet. I don't think it matters. Wherever the fishing hamlet is, it's not in Yharnam. It's somewhere far away. It's somewhere that the Byrgenwerth hunters, specifically Gehrman and Maria, traveled to. What was going on in the fishing hamlet? Well, there was a dead Great One that washed up. There was the corpse of a Great One on the shore. Obviously, that would have drawn Byrgenwerth's attention. The guidebook says that it was the raid by the hunters that killed Kos. I think that's stupid. I hate to be really blunt about it, but I think that's stupid because I think think that none of the evidence in the game points to that. And the guidebook is a secondary source, and yes, FromSoft had some input on it, but by Future Press's own admission, that guidebook is a secondary source, and I can't possibly rationalize the idea that it was the hunters that killed Kos. Everything seems to point towards Kos being dead when the hunters arrived. So whatever. The corpse of a Great One washed ashore, as is evidenced by the Kos parasite. Now, so if you read The Pale Blood Hunt, I proposed the fact that since the fishing hamlet is a whaling town, it's possible that it was the villagers who killed Kos in the first place. I think that's still a perfectly reasonable possibility, but I think it would be interesting to explore a different kind of possibility for the purpose of this explanation, which is that the corpse of a Great One washed ashore, and the villagers began to worship it. We see the transformed villagers of the fishing hamlet visibly praying and worshiping the corpse of Kos and the orphan. We find all littered throughout the fishing hamlet just barrels upon barrels of slugs, which are presumably the Kos parasites themselves. We find them everywhere, and we even find on corpse piles just that are in some of the houses, just tiny little slugs just sort of wriggling and squirming all around them. Pretty gross. So it's almost like there was some kind of cult that was worshipping this dead Great One and its unborn child, because at this point the orphan was just sort of trapped inside of the womb of its dead mother. And then Gehrman and Maria came, and they massacred everyone. They slaughtered everyone. They cut a path to Kos, and the people had been slowly transforming into these monsters. If you notice, the fishmen in the Nightmare actually bleed the same way that the orphan does, which is they bleed mostly red, but it has like a violent tint to it, which sort of implies a connection between the two. And since the Kos parasites are specifically called parasites, I think it's a reasonable idea that maybe these parasites began infecting the villagers. In the Pale Blood Hunt, I suggested it was involuntary, but in this possibility, it's also it was possibly voluntary, maybe as a part of this cultish practice. And then, spooky shit happened. Gehrman and Maria left with the cord, and basically everything went to hell. But so how do we link Brador to this? Well, aside from the obvious fact that his key is found in the fishing hamlet, You also find his garb in the fishing hamlet. Now, what happens is, when you wander around the fishing hamlet, there are 3 different places where Brador will attack you. Each time he attacks you, you can kill his phantom, and he'll drop a piece of his clothing. He drops the testimony in the Grand Cathedral, where which I think is important. He drops the testimony in the Grand Cathedral, which is possibly where Lawrence transformed, his testimony, his witness to the transformation of Lawrence, hence the secret. And so you can explain this dropping bit as sort of, so what I was trying to say is, what's interesting is that if you, immediately after you pick up the key, if you bail, and you go just run over and kill Brador as soon as possible, his bits of garb will drop where his phantoms would have invaded you. And when I first played, I initially just sort of thought of this as a way for the game to not fuck you out of getting a really cool looking gear set, because that would have been really stupid. So if you just went and killed Brador, his phantoms will just drop the gear so you can pick it up and you can have it, and you don't have to play through the entire game over again just to get his gear. But and I think that's likely. But you can also kind of think about it as if we know that Brador doesn't give a fuck about costs. Brador specifically doesn't want you to find him. He doesn't want you to get to him. So maybe Brador is protecting stuff that's important to him. The place where you get the garb is a house. Maybe, and this is just random, but maybe it's like you go into Brador's house and he shows up there, and then you go and you find Brador's old gloves and he attacks you. So I don't know, that's kind of an interesting thing, but that's a very loose connection. And the only real ironclad connection I could find between Brador and the fishing hamlet, other than the fact that his key is there, is the fact that Brador chugs lead elixirs like a madman. He loves that stuff. He's the only NPC in the game who uses lead elixirs. And what do we find all throughout the fishing hamlet? Lead elixirs. They're everywhere. Lead elixirs are also found in the Nightmare Frontier, and the implication is that whatever this stuff is, it comes from the Dreamlands, which would explain, I guess, how the guys in the fishing hamlet got it, because, they sort of exist as halfway in the Dreamlands themselves. They have a fucking great one washed up on the coast. So it makes sense that they would create and consume lead elixir, possibly as part of their cultish practices. So it makes a lot of sense to me that Brador, if he was from the fishing hamlet, is chugging down lead elixirs. And if Brador is from the fishing hamlet, and Brador is from the same place we are, then we're from the fishing hamlet. So we're from the fishing hamlet, and then we went to Yarhnam, and then we forgot everything and we were reborn. Because we were reborn. We are a different person. Whoever we were before we became the Pale Blood Hunter, that's not who we are anymore. We're a new person. We've been born again through the use of blood. We've been Bloodborne at the beginning of the game, and we get Bloodborne a second time at the end of the game if we beat the Moon Presence. So whoever we were doesn't mean who we are now. Whatever violent past we had, now we can be a noble person. So I don't think it limits us at all in terms of storytelling, in terms of who we possibly are. And this sounds like a lot of speculation, but it really answers a lot of big mysteries. For example, we know what pale blood is. A lot of people, and this is an idea I've toyed with but I've never really talked about, believe that the handwritten scrawl in the beginning of the game is brought there by the player themselves. And oh, pale blood, well, Yarhnam's full of blood, dude, so I'm sure you'll find whatever you're looking for here. That's what the blood doctor says to us in the beginning of the game. So, if we were part of some kind of cult that worshipped the Great Ones, that would certainly explain why we know what the fuck pale blood is. Or at least why we did before we lost our memories. It would also explain the Canehurst invitation. The noble scion origin specifically states us as being sort of somewhat distantly related to nobility, and in that origin, our attributes give us a pretty high blood tinge. And we know from Alfred's dialogue that a lot of these invitations were sent out to invite important people to the castle. If we were the lone survivor from a cult, it would definitely make sense why the Vilebloods would want to get their hands on us and invite us over and take a look. So that would explain why we might have brought the Cainhurst invitation with us when we came to Yarhnam, because we're going to swing by Yarhnam, cure our incurable disease, and then we're going to hitch a ride to Cainhurst. Only, then we lose our memory and the original plan gets shot. Yeah, it really puts the pieces together really well. It really fits everything together if that's our origin. And it really explains why the Huntsman, or it puts this whole new spin on how the Yarhnamites keep saying, this is all your fault. Because maybe it is. The worship of Kos and the death of Kos is what kickstarted this whole thing. So maybe it is our fault. Maybe all of what's going on right now is our fault. And that is so cool. That's so interesting. I don't know. It's definitely a really interesting, really cool possibility that I think has to be taken seriously. And before the DLC, I would have agreed that it's kind of silly to speculate about who we were before we came to Yarhnam. But Brador knows who we were. We knew the guy. He knew us. And Brador, possibly from the fishing hamlet originally, means we're possibly from the fishing hamlet. And I just got a text message because I am super popular. Oh, it's nothing important. Sort of anticlimactic, right? Okay. And that was all I wanted to talk about today. Whew. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything you would like me to go over, in particular, any new topics that you'd like me to go over, please leave your comments below, or feel free to send me a message. I try to read and respond to all my messages, but a lot of them slip through the cracks, so I apologize if that happens to you. Next time, I will either release my project, which I've been working on, and I keep hyping this project up to be something huge. It's really not. Half of the time is just me tinkering around with audio software and figuring it out and learning as I go. It's really not that big a deal. It's the only reason it's taking so long is because I'm basically figuring out everything. And the next episode of the Little Things in Yarhnam will probably have to do with Uden. Because I think I finally understand where Uden fits into everything. I think I finally, after 9 months, have this idea of what Uden is and where he fits into everything and how he sort of fits into the cyclical nature of Bloodborne. I think I finally sort of have that. And after that, I think I'll have talked about all the really big things I want to talk about. And then after that, it'll probably be business as usual. I want to make, maybe we'll talk about the verticality, how all the Dreamlands are supposedly stacked. Or I kind of want to talk about the Astral Clock Tower, the runes on the Astral Clock Tower. I kind of want to talk about Simon. So after Uden, it's going to go back to the little things in Yharnam. It's going to be business as usual. I am exhausted after that. Wow. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.